After a wild couple weeks on the road, I'm back and I'm ready to talk about Planet Comicon 2022, ready to share with you some of the crazy things that I picked up while we were at the show. And believe it or not, this is my 100th YouTube video, so we're going to talk about that. Stick around and we'll get into it all. All right, well, as I mentioned, I just got back from Planet Comicon. The show was actually a couple weeks ago, but I was gone last weekend, so now I'm finally back home and can sit down and talk about it a little bit. As far as the show goes, it's always our big show of the year. It's the region's biggest show, and you really have to go to some place like Chicago or Denver or Dallas to find a show that's bigger anywhere near here in central Missouri. We're always excited to set up there. It is a little more expensive than most of the shows we typically set up at, but you know, that's just what you run into with larger shows. We had a really great show. In fact, we were so busy, I didn't really get out and get to shop a lot at the show, but as luck would have it, I didn't really need to because a lot of the things I was hoping to find at the show and bring home actually walked up to the booth to me, so I didn't even have to go out and get it. It just kept walking up one piece at a time over the course of the weekend, and I was actually able to check off a lot of boxes for things I had hoped to bring home one day. I can't explain it. It was really awesome, and I'm glad it happened that way. But unfortunately, what that means is I don't have a lot of video to share of me out on the floor shopping the different comic book dealers. There were quite a few comic book dealers, and there were some really nice books in the room this year, which is always good to see. But I did scrape together a little bit of footage, just general stuff, and I put together a little 1-minute montage. So let's go ahead and check that out. This is Planet Comicon Kansas City 2022. I hope you enjoyed that little montage. Planet Comicon Kansas City is a 3-day show, but we always go down a day early on Thursday for setup. So we were actually in Kansas City for 4 days, and it's always a blast. It seems like it takes forever to get here, and then as soon as it's here, it's over. You're so tired by the time you get finished with each day, but you're always going and doing something, whether that's seeing people you only see at the show that one time of the year, going out and doing things, hitting some of your local favorites. There's never a dull moment, and in the blink of an eye, it's all over. And I'm already excited for next year's show to come. It's kind of our working vacation of the year, if you will. We're going to be at the show regardless. So we just set up and have a good time. And yeah, we work our butts off, but me, Mrs. Como, the crew that goes with me, Bob and Jeremy, who've helped the last couple years. Bob is actually the guy doing the funny pose in the montage. He's kind of my right-hand man, always with me on the road. So if you see him at a show in the area, say hi. He's a good dude, but we always have a great time, and this year was no exception. So let's get into some of the things I came home with. One of the cool things about these bigger shows, and especially larger shows with a big number of guests, it's pretty much inevitable that somebody will eventually come by your booth that's famous, that's worked in the industry, you name it. You never know who will walk up. And this year was no exception to that. I actually had an opportunity to meet and to sell some books to more than one creator. It was a really awesome experience on both accounts. First up, Patrick Gleason. walked up to the booth. He'd gotten some yard time out on the show floor, and he was out hunting for some books for his personal collection. And we kind of hit it off, and we were just talking. I was helping him try and find what he was looking for. And I wound up having a few things, and I got to sell some books to Patrick Gleason. It was pretty cool. While he was there, we shot a picture, which you're probably looking at now or will soon. He gave me this little pin. I can get it to focus here. Gave me this pin. Just all in all, a really great dude. Had a nice time chatting with him, and I actually wound up going to his booth later on, and I had him do a little remark. The only thing I bought at the show that didn't walk up to the booth is this second printing of Amazing Spider-Man 55. But as you can see, it's not your standard second print of Amazing Spider-Man 55. It's got this awesome Green Goblin remark that I had him do. Should be no surprise to anybody. The Green Goblin's my favorite villain in all of comics, so it just seemed fitting. Unfortunately, I was hoping to grab one of the Green Goblin variants he's done for Amazing Spider-Man #1 that just came out, but due to some shipping issues or production delays, whatever, he actually didn't have his own personal copies of those books at the show, so I didn't get to get one of those. But hey, a Green Goblin remark is not a bad consolation prize. The next cool thing that happened is Bill Morrison stopped by my booth. He came by, again, I think it was early on Saturday, and he hit one of my Golden Age boxes. He was pulling some stuff out, and I recognized him, but I'm terrible with names and faces and stuff. But I knew I'd seen him somewhere before. We closed out that transaction. You know, he went back to his booth. I stayed at my booth and was doing my thing. And the next thing I know, he comes back, and he has the promoter of the show with him, who's a buddy of mine. So he's had seen the books that he'd purchased. He's like, "Where'd you get these things?" Because the promoter collects a lot of the similar things. So they came back by, and then Chris, who runs Planet, formally introduced me to Bill, told me a little bit about him, which kind of was a light bulb moment. It's like, duh, how could I not know this guy? But if you're not familiar with Bill Morrison, he was heavily involved with Bongo Comics, and he was also the final executive editor of Mad Magazine. So if you're familiar with Mad Magazine and the history of that, a guy by the name of Harvey Kurtzman kind of started that whole thing. He was the last guy to have the job that Harvey Kurtzman had for Mad Magazine. And what kind of brings this around full circle is, as the promoter Chris was telling me all of these things about him, I kind of had an epiphany, because I had just picked up a really cool old issue of Mad at an auction locally here a few weeks prior. And I'm like, well, if you were the last editor of Mad, I have to show you this book I just bought. And what it was a copy of Mad 21. I'll go ahead and throw a picture of it up here on the screen for you to check out. But it's considered the first cameo cover appearance of Alfred E. Newman. He shows up as just this little tiny head next to some other notable people on the cover. And I'm like, I've got to show this book to Bill. And as it happened, he really liked it, and he wound up picking up this really nice copy of Mad 21 I'd just gotten in. So for me, being a huge EC fan, being able to take an original comic-sized Mad Magazine issue and sell it to the guy who was the final executive editor of the whole project was just super awesome. I was kind of a little bit blown away about with the whole situation, and thought it was really cool. So thank you, Chris, for being curious and, you know, wanting to know where those books came from, because had that not happened, the whole rest of the story wouldn't have come to fruition, and I wouldn't have this cool story to tell. So those were my big celebrity moments for the weekend. Again, anytime somebody who's in the industry walks up to the booth and shops with you, and you kind of get to interact and do some business together, I just think it's really cool. It's one of the fun little perks of selling at shows. But enough about things I sold. Let's talk about some of the things that walked up that I decided to bring home. The first book I brought home is Resident Evil #1. This is a promo that came out from Marvel. Came out around the time that the first game came out. It's a Capcom venture, of course. They did the video games. But I'm a huge Resident Evil fan, and this is a book that has been on my short list for a while. If you've been watching some of the content, you know I've been trying to pick up some just random 90s and 80s one-off #1s and just kind of random books that are nostalgic for me. So being a huge Resident Evil fan, that was a no-brainer. I had to pick it up. And the interesting thing is, me and my buddy Tom from Middle School Geek, shout out Middle School Geek Comics, great friend of ours. We set up together at a lot of shows. We had just been having a conversation about this book not 20 minutes before it actually walked up to the booth. And the funny thing is, the guy who sold it to me was actually at Tom's booth first and was showing him some stuff he was wanting to sell. He's like, okay, yeah, I would like to buy that, but I know my buddy next door wants it. So he sent him over to me. So thank you, Tom, for doing that. And thank you to the universe for throwing this guy our way 20 minutes after we had that conversation. Next thing, a customer who comes by and sees us pretty much every year at Planet. I really enjoy this guy's company. Talking comics with him is a blast, and he has just some unbelievable stuff. As you saw earlier, there was a comic called Huzzah. If you've been on our website or seen some of the random pictures I use of me and some of our media stuff, there's a picture of me with a gobbledygook #1. Those are both from this particular customer. And we were able to make a deal this week. He had a couple things he was looking to sell just to get some cash to have some more fun at the show. And it turned out a couple of those things were things I really wanted. So first up, I got a copy of Ninja Turtles #2. This is the second print. I've already got a first print, so I'm working on filling out the complete Mirage run. And this is one I didn't have yet. So I went ahead and nabbed that from him. And the other thing I picked up from him is this copy of Primer #2. He actually had a couple of these he was looking to move. And this book is kind of sentimental for me. A buddy of mine who ran my LCS that I worked at for years here in town, Grindel was his favorite character. And he passed away a couple years ago, actually just a little while before I started the channel. And I've always wanted to get one of these just kind of to keep in my collection, kind of in memory of him. So when this copy walked up, I don't necessarily want to have the nicest one ever. I just want to have one in the collection to remember my buddy by. And this one, while it probably looked pretty decent when I held it up, it does need a press. You can see some of the waviness in it. Presents really well, just needs a press, needs to get flattened back out, and it will 100% fit the bill for what I'm looking for. I have a copy of Primer 2. So that was awesome. I looked at a couple in the room that were for sale from other vendors, and I had sticker shock. They were way over what I was looking to invest in a copy of that book. So again, the universe just threw me a fastball right down the middle, and I was blown away by the opportunity to pick up those two books from the same guy. And it wasn't even that. We sat there and we just chatted for 10 or 15 minutes, had a great conversation, did a little business. I think we wound up really just trading straight up. He got a couple of Silver Age X-Men I had on the wall. I got these books. Good conversation. Everybody left happy. It was just a great experience all around. So always looking forward to seeing him at the show each year. And every time I see him, he just breaks out something crazy that's awesome to see. Next thing that walked up was a little trade. This one hurt me a little bit, but I think it's probably an okay trade. What I gave up, I traded my CGC 4.0 Fantastic Four 48. I've had this book for a while. the values in books have appreciated so much from when I bought the collection this book was in, that the book itself was actually worth more than I paid for the whole collection at this point. So it was kind of an interesting place to be at as far as negotiating a trade. But what I traded for, and this actually came from No Coast Comics, so check him out on Instagram and YouTube. Was a really great guy. He was there shooting some content. We had a great conversation and we worked out this deal. And what I got was a 7.0 CGC copy of Werewolf by Night 32. This might be a book you've heard of, because nobody out there has not had Moon Knight on their tongue for the last year, 2 years, however long. It seems like all we do is talk about Moon Knight anymore. So this is by far the nicest copy of this book I've ever had. And I'm kind of torn as far as what to do with it. I put it on the wall for the rest of the weekend, just thinking, you know, why not? We were 4 episodes into the show, when we were at Planet. So like, I'll see if somebody wants to bite on it. But the other copies I've had have not been nearly this nice. About the nicest one I'd had up until this one was a Raw 5.0. And if you've watched the content, you probably know that story. I literally sold it for $50 about 7 years ago, before anybody gave a damn about Moon Knight. So that's a regret. Just spoiler alert, if you buy and sell comics long enough, you're going to have those ones you look back on and you're like, yeah, I messed up. That one's one of mine. So I'll probably hold on to this book for a little while until, you know, I decide not to. Moon Knight's not really a character I'm really passionate about, I'm too excited about. But I'm a completionist, so I might as well hang on to it. So happy to have that book. Thank you to No Coast for the trade. We did a fun little dance, and I think we were both happy when it was all over. We both got what we wanted, so I think that's the important part. And I don't know that I've mentioned it yet. I did a lot of trading at this show. That was a little bit different. I've done some trades before, but the level of trades, the volume of trades, the scale of the trades was a lot bigger at this show than what I've seen at the past. So trading 4-figure books with customers was a little bit different. I'm used to a little bit smaller ball, I guess, when it comes to that kind of stuff. But it was a good time. And I think for the most part, everybody is happy with the deals that were struck. The next thing that walked up to the booth, I couldn't believe the story, but it was crazy, and I'm really happy for the guy. But the next thing that walked up that I brought home is a 9.2 CGC copy of Maximum Carnage #1. If you're not familiar with this book, this is actually another promo from the 90s. It was put out by Acclaim, the video game company, and Marvel when they made the Maximum Carnage video game. So it's a partial painted cover from Bill Sienkiewicz. So he painted the Spider-Man, the Venom, and the Carnage, and they overimposed it from on top of this photograph. It's also the cover art to the video game, and it's a pretty pricey book, to be honest. It's hard to find, and when you do find it, it's pretty expensive. The story behind this one is the customer who sold it to me when he was a kid went to Toys R Us, and the deal was when you bought a copy of the game, they gave you a copy of this book. I guess they got to the end of it, or the store he was at just didn't really feel like messing with it, because they had taken a stack of the free handout comic books and just set them back in the toy aisle. And of course, they're all marked free. So like any kid, he's like, oh, free. Grabs the stack of 12 of these Maximum Carnage #1s, holds on to them, sends them off to CGC X number of years later, comes back with 198, a pile of 96s, and then the rest are just kind of sprinkled between 94 and 90. So obviously he did really well for himself for an investment of $0 and just keeping them in good shape for 30 years. But thankfully we were able to make a deal. That's another book that's been on my radar and just something I really didn't want to devote a ton of revenue to. So the fact that he had so little in it allowed me to get the book that I had wanted for a while, because I love this game when I was a kid, but it allowed me to get this book at a better price than what I would have gotten had I been out there looking to buy it retail off somebody's wall. One, God only knows when the opportunity to do that would have came up, and two, pretty much anybody who has a copy of this book knows what they have, and they tend to price it very aggressively. So super stoked to have that, and that one's not going anywhere for a long time. But thank you very much to that customer for the deal. Super happy to have that. And the last book that I traded for, right in the last hour or so of the show, I traded a 5.0 Batman 181, the first appearance of Poison Ivy, for this book. We got a CGC 8.0 Iron Man 55. So everybody knows what this book is. It's one of the hotter books of the Bronze Age over the course of the last 4 or 5 years. You got the first Thanos, the first Star Fox, the first Drax, Kronos, Blood Brothers. It's basically Jim Starlin just throwing everything he had up against the wall to see what stuck. And this is one of the nicer copies I've had. It's the only graded copy I've had for sale outside of my PC copy. My PC copy, if you saw like my top 50 video, or my top 50 comics in my collection video, I have a 9.6. So an 8.0's nice, but I don't know, perspective, I guess. But this book is definitely in the inventory. I'm not going to hang on to this one. So you will find this book on the wall at my next show. But still just a very cool book to have. And honestly, my thought process on that trade was that Batman 181 I'd had for a while. And I find that the customer who's looking for Batman 181 often doesn't like to pay the price of Batman 181, especially in the last couple years where it's really kicked up a level in price. I feel like this Iron Man 55, especially in an 8.0 with white pages, is a lot more liquid than the Batman 181. Lots of people like Poison Ivy, but there's just so much more hype, a lot more drive in the market behind Iron Man 55 right now compared to the 181. So I was happy to make that trade. And the Batman was a CBCS, and I know there are collectors out there who prefer CGC slabs. I don't really get that. I buy the book, not the label. But a CGC 8.0 Iron Man 55 should be more liquid, especially over a CBCS book, whereas that can turn off some people for some reason. But last but not least, this is my 100th YouTube upload. I just want to take a second to thank everyone who's watched the videos, shared the videos, commented, hung out with us on the live streams, just any and everything that you've done over the course of these last 2+ years to support the channel. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to see where we go from here. Got a lot more content coming, and again, thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything you all have done for Como Comic Books, and I look forward to continuing on for a long time. Collect responsibly, everybody. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.